Hello. So I've had a couple of people ask me on what I thought about the 16-minute Hytale showcase, especially a friend of mine. Hey, Tommy. At the time, I didn't really have much to say. I kind of just said, and interesting, because I usually need a moment to really digest these sorts of things. But now that I've watched it a couple of times, I think I should be able to give an opinion now. Now, this first clip kind of suggests something that we will see throughout the showcase. Mostly how sometimes something will take a few more hits than it should. Like, say, for this very basic enemy, I think it should be a little bit shorter. It's not particularly atrocious here, but it is something to note. I have seen that they are going to try and fix this. It is something that they have noted, so I will remain hopeful on that, and I will probably not bring it up for the rest of the video. Just note that, yes, I have kept that in mind. Now, the next clip here, we see some mobility options, mostly the vaulting, and I believe they take a jump and like roll slide here. I'm always a big fan of mobility options, so big plus for me. I think this could be pretty handy with parkour, though I don't know how at this moment. I'd have to get my hands on it myself. A nice little quality of life feature here, a very popular plugin for Minecraft, is the tree cutter type thing. I don't know what to call this feature exactly, a tree falling feature. Now, I just hope that the game can differentiate between trees and a proper building, because I just don't want people to accidentally, cut down their own buildings. I imagine they have a system for that, but it's worth noting. Now, one thing that I do want to make note of here is that when Simon kills the skeleton here, the game doesn't properly communicate to him that the skeleton is dead. It kind of just stays standing. Now, I don't know off the top of my head if the game uses a ragdoll, animation, or like a combination of the two. Whatever happened, it's not working properly here, and Simon accidentally makes another half-hearted shot, and that's something that's going to have to be worked on before the final release, because clear communication to the player is always important. Now, I'm noticing right here that we have the F key to pick up certain ground items like poppies or flowers or shrubs or mushrooms, that sort of thing. I'm hoping that it's the same button that we would use to interact with most items, because I don't want to have too many keybinds in a game, because the problem with that is that some players are going to inevitably want to arrange these in their own way, and if you have too many keybinds, they're not going to really be able to customize it into the way they want. Also, an even bigger point is that this game is basically made to support mods, and with mods, there are inevitably going to be more keybinds. So I'm just hoping that the amount of keybinds for this game is relatively low. There are plenty of ways to do this, basically just compacting a bunch of different functions into one key depending on the context. So I'm hoping that this is the same key to open up a chest or something. Now, we're not able to see too much of it here, but there are quite a number of barrels and whatnot around here. I'm just hoping that this area sufficiently rewards the player for doing this, because, attacking these bandits and whatnot, because if you don't, your world is going to feel empty, even though it technically isn't. I'm going to stay positive on that, because we don't have a chance to really see these chests, and for all we know, because it's an alpha, they might have not figured out all the loot yet. and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to get into it right now, but that is something that I do want to bring up in case somebody watching this happens to be making their own game or something. I don't know. Now, Simon kind of runs away here and goes up to this random spot of the camp that, oddly, even though there are valuables and it's an extremely easy entry in, there's nobody guarding this, which, oh my gosh, an ad. Now, I don't know if this is because Simon kind of doctored this up, like maybe he took the guys that would have been here out just so he could show off the chair feature and the breaking of pots for a second, or if there's no actual spawning here. If there is no spawning in this very obvious place of entry, that's something that they might want to work on. You know, just little game design things, you know. Now, something that this clip very clearly shows is that, I mean, first off, the skeleton is using the sword instead of the shield to block, but that's a minor point. I've realized that there's no real good counter to blocking, and I don't think the answer is to, like, switch to a specific weapon to disable the shield or something, because I believe if you switch weapons, like right here, yeah, their special bar resets, so it kind of encourages you to stay on the same weapon for a decent amount of time, so I don't see this game demanding you switch out weapons constantly. So that being said, how do you take care of a shield or somebody blocking? One of the biggest issues that I have with Minecraft is that in order to take care of to disable a shield, it's quite clunky. You either need to pull out an axe extremely slowly, or you have to use a lava bucket to take advantage of their slow mobility, which they could just immediately counter with a water bucket, unfortunately. So that's something that I do hope they answer in future showcases. However, on the positive side of things, I realize I'm being a little bit negative. That's just how I do things. I focus on the negatives first and then get to the positives. The spacing of this area is very satisfying from a gameplay standpoint. You have the skeleton utilizing these points of elevation. You have the player kind of having their vision blocked by the rocks, but they don't have a hard time getting out of there earlier. It's a very good piece of level design. Nice job. Also, the spacing within there as well is just overall great. I have no real complaints when it comes to the overall level design. I think most of this was filmed in a prefab world, so I don't know how natural regeneration stuff is going to work, if that's even a thing in this game. Unfortunately, I don't actually know that much about this game. I apologize. But yeah, that's my general thoughts on this. Now, going to this enemy right here, I noticed that Simon had a stupidly easy time taking care of these guys. And I think that's because of the lack of attack variety from these. Now, if they were smaller bugs, more like cannon fodder, I wouldn't mind so much. And we do see some smaller bugs here, but some of the bigger ones, I feel like should have a little more strategy going into fighting them. Like maybe a lunge or a spit attack. I think a very good example to take inspiration from is Deep Rock Galactic. There's a bunch of different bug types that have a variety of different attacks, and I think that's something that could be very easily implemented here. And overall, I do kind of wish that the cave setting was utilized a little bit more. Maybe that can be used in these bugs' moveset. Now I'm going to turn the volume up, because right here, I note that the music and ambience changes really fast.
Download Arkanites now to receive tons
Okay,
of
maybe not that
New
fast.
players enjoy a free 10
Now, that sort of change does work if you are working in like an RPG or something where there are preset areas, but in a free open world like this, it's a little bit jarring. So what I would do is have the fade out be slower and then wait like 10 seconds before switching to the next track. The ambience, I think, could be a little bit quicker, but make sure it's also decently subtle. However, the looks, like the general ambience of this place, look great. The overall aesthetics of this game are fantastic. They break the lines a lot. There's a lot of layering in the composition. Where's a good example of this? Even in the desert here, there is usually something to look at. If you look up, you see these hills. If you look left, you see that hill. If you look over this way, there's a tree. There's a lot of composition, a lot of lines, a lot of layers, and the art style is very consistent. And the lighting, while not demanding or too distracting, is very dramatic and immersive and works really well with this more voxel style that Hytale kind of has going. And I overall think that this is a really solid balance. I could see some improvements in the future, but overall, if they kept it like this for the rest of the game, I really wouldn't mind that much. Going back to the Forest of Doom and Gloom, you hear their walking steps right here. Note the pace of this. But after they climb this wall, they do this sort of sneak thing. And notice how the pace of that sneaking sounds a lot faster. I think this is a bug, and I hope this is something that they fix in the future. But it is a little immersion breaking and also kind of confuses the player from a sound standpoint, because from a sound standpoint, they are making a desperate sprint and run, but they're actually trying to sneak around. And I just hope that's fixed later on. Oh, that sound design. There are bits of the sound that, and I literally just talked about like some issues that I had with the sound, but the sound design is very interesting. It's detailed and very tactile, but not so detailed that it distracts from the overall not super detailed world that we're living in here. I like how Hytale, or not Hytale, oh my gosh. I like how Simon just went, nope. Now, this effect is cool, but I find it a little bit distracting. First of all, the effect here, and we'll see this a couple more times as well, it's not really pixelated at all. It's kind of too round, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. It almost feels a little bit jarring, but outside of that I think that might just be preference speaking, but I think this effect is a little too overwhelming, especially for an item that I think is supposed to be used in combat. Like, the green tint here is extremely aggressive, and if there is, say, a smaller enemy or just something that on the edge of your screen, you will have a hard time seeing them. So I overall do hope that this is toned down in the future. Looks cool, but just needs to be tamed a little. Now, I'm not so sure how I feel about the game design here. Now, this might be going back to the balancing issue, but this guy kind of goes down in one hit pretty quickly, but they seem fairly bulky, and it doesn't seem to be like part of its master plan, because they are relatively defenseless when they go up to fight this guy here. Nothing. So I'm wondering if maybe that should take more than one arrow hit, but again, I don't know the intention here. Maybe the point is for them to be weak so that they can send these zombies after you. I'm not entirely certain there, I'll be honest. Now, there is a very minor issue here where Simon kind of gets this jagged screen tearing when he skims down this waterfall. It's kind of hard to detect if you're not paying attention, and I think what's happening is that the game reads him as close to the water, and maybe it's not really knowing what to do with his player character. That is a theory. I can't be super confident on that, and quite frankly, it's not that big of an issue, but I figured I'd mention it. Something that I really enjoy here is the use of colored lighting. I've been wanting colored lighting in Minecraft since the Sea Lantern came out, I think. That might have been 1.8. And just seeing it here is so satisfying. And it's worked into this Sphax Pure BDcraft / World of Warcraft art style really well. And also, interesting note, the caves are decently bright, but it's not so bright that you can't hide enemies in here. So I think overall, great design. Something I have heard is that there are a number of AI or like spawning conditions that aren't set up properly yet. And maybe that's why this swamp feels particularly dead. Usually swamps are depicted being very hostile, but also very populated, very dense, almost, what's the word? Claustrophobic in a sense. I'm kind of imagining like visible fireflies or dragonflies or something of that sort. And also a couple of minor enemies that are kind of like cannon fodder just to help communicate that yes, this is a hostile place. And everything about the aesthetics here is telling me that, outside of everything that should be moving, or everything that should have AI. The only enemy we really see here is that one, and one other on the edge of the forest. Hopefully, as the AI is developed more, we see more mobs in these sorts of biomes, but that is something to note. Back to this positive side of things, having a torch that you can carry without having to commit to placing it down or anything is just neat. Because this is a sandbox game, there's going to be a lot of situations where the game doesn't properly light itself. The Hytale team has done a decent job of lighting the world in certain areas, but in areas like this, especially the desert, it's kind of hard to come up with a creative excuse to have lights here. So being able to have torchlight without, having to do too much is great. Love it. Now, I really enjoy this setup. You have an entrance right here, but there's a guard right here, and the outskirts of the base a little bit are well lit and happen to have guards there. That might purely be by chance, but regardless, the lights help make this place stand out among everything else in the desert. And overall, this is just a really good way to introduce the concept of this structure to the player. I just realized something here. There was like some mud that like slowed the player down a little bit. Having blocks that actually affect the player in some fashion is great from a sandbox standpoint, because then you allow players to really mess with certain mechanics. Oh my gosh. Okay, YouTube has been aggressive with the ads as of recently. I think it's because it's almost Christmas. So with the map here, I usually like to have some sort of in-world explanation for why the player has a map. However, this world is pretty big, and I don't know how you would seamlessly have something like, say, a normal Minecraft map without having to go into a menu anyways. I like to avoid menus where I can, especially when I'm designing a Minecraft base. So yeah, that's kind of iffy for me, but it's hard to come up with a way to get around that, so I don't really particularly blame them here. Simon, mute your mic, man. I can hear his mouse clicks when he's going through the map. That's funny. Now, something I've noticed is that sprinting is pretty aggressive on stamina drain. Something that I would do to kind of fix this is either to make your stamina drain a little more bearable by level up, because I know there are some RPG elements to this. Just make it less stamina costing in general, or to make mounts easily available. Because eventually a player is going to want to get around the world and recover places that they've already explored, and having that stamina drain on them constantly will just get annoying. Again with that ambience. Something that I don't really like in Minecraft is how aggressive the particles of rain are. And because I do work with video and streaming and what have you, that sometimes makes Minecraft incredibly hard to stream because aggressive rain really eats up bitrate. So seeing that's a little more subtle here while still giving off the appropriate vibes is amazing. Perfect. Now, apparently this scene is underground, which is just... This conceptually is just cool. It gives me those Hollow Earth vibes, but it kind of leans into that World of Warcraft art style, that cartoony art style that has been so visually appealing about this, and really leans into that fantasy setting. It's just look at this. I don't need to explain this to you. This just looks cool. This is the kind of visionary work that people have been wanting out of Minecraft for a long time. And it's so cool to see it done here with such clarity. And it just like, oh, the ambient edge of that water glowing. And you can see kind of the spires from the ceiling being outlined by the blue lights, and the trees being silhouetted by the lights as well. This is just really fun composition and lighting work. Nicely done. Also, that soundtrack. It matches this up perfectly. It is just beautiful. Holy smokes. Now, this guy right here kind of gives me a mixed attacker vibe. Like, they would shoot fire at you, but also getting close and would probably have a decent amount of health. Now, this is kind of going back to the game balance thing again, but this guy was easy to take down, not only from a health standpoint, but also from a conceptual standpoint, because all they did was run up to the player and try and attack. I really hope to see more attack variety there. I think the reason the skeletons get away with it, in my mind, is that skeletons are generally a more basic enemy. And this zombie here, you're kind of expecting as a player to have a more basic fight. But when you get into the more interesting monster designs, I think you should really back that up with your gameplay. I have no thoughts here. I just think this guy's design is cool. Now, I'm not really going to give my thoughts on the creation tools until I get my hands properly on it. I do have a friend who does kind of plan to make mods for this, or at least a mod. And I wouldn't mind learning how to do models to kind of do some pixel art work. I think that could be a fun experience. But something that I really do want to point out here, the render distance is pretty solid. Now, I can kind of tell by the fact that this is running in 4K, 60 frames per second, that Simon has a decently beefy computer, so I don't know what this really says about the game's performance. But having this render distance be an option is pretty neat. I think this is meant to show off the mod tools. I don't see a gun being used in the game, so... or at least guns that are that advanced. So I don't know, but whatever. Now, I will say the animation on this portal here is a little bit janky, but I imagine that they are aware of that. So yeah, I think that about sums things up. Tommy, hopefully that's a bit more sufficient than what I said the other night. And yeah, have a good one.